You've done it, maybe not consciously, but at some point you've looked at your pantry and thought, yeah, I'm covered. There's rice, there's a couple of cans of beans, a box of pasta in the back somewhere. You've got the basics. Here's the problem. So does everyone else. The psychology of emergency shopping is brutally predictable. When a storm rolls in, when a blackout stretches past 24 hours, when the news gets bad enough, people don't improvise. They rush to what they know. Rice, pasta, canned tomatoes, peanut butter, the classic American pantry list, the same one shared in every Reddit thread, every FEMA pamphlet, every well-meaning article on how to prepare. And that list gets cleared in hours. In March 2020, major grocery chains across the United States watched their shelves go bare on staple items inside a single business day. Walmart, Kroger, Publix, all reporting the same pattern. The instant the word shortage entered the national conversation, people didn't think. They reacted, and they all reacted the same way. What nobody talks about is what stayed on those shelves for days, sometimes for the entire wave. That's what this video is about. Not the list everyone shares, the other list, the one that never trends on social media. The one that doesn't get picked clean because it requires a small shift in how you think about food, not just what you eat, but what food actually does for you in a sustained emergency. The families who came through 2020 with the least stress and the most flexibility weren't the ones who hoarded early, they were the ones who had already stocked the overlooked aisle. And by the time you finish this video, you'll know exactly what was on it, and why it may be more valuable than anything in your current emergency kit. Let's talk about something most emergency food plans completely ignore: fat. Not the macronutrient people cut when they're dieting, the actual caloric and functional backbone of sustained cooking. Without cooking fat, your stockpile of grains and legumes becomes miserable, dry, monotonous, hard to digest in bulk, and within days of relying on a no-fat diet under stress, you'll feel it cognitively first, then physically. The challenge is obvious. Most cooking fats are fragile. Vegetable oil oxidizes. Butter needs refrigeration after opening. Regular peanut butter, technically fatty, turns rancid within weeks at room temperature once opened. The shelf options for stable fat are actually very short, unless you know what you're looking for. Ghee changes that calculation entirely. Ghee is clarified butter. The milk solids have been removed, which is exactly what causes butter to spoil. Stored in a sealed, airtight jar kept away from heat and light, ghee is stable at room temperature for months. In cooler pantry conditions between 68-77 degrees Celsius, 20-25 degrees Celsius, it holds quality for up to 6 months to a year after opening. Commercial producers and traditional households across South Asia have used this fact for centuries without refrigeration. Refined coconut oil works similarly. High saturated fat content means slow oxidation. Clarified animal lard, the kind your grandmother rendered from pork, performs the same way. None of these were on the shelves that emptied in 2020. All three were sitting there, waiting. 1 jar of ghee, typically under 15 ja'ol, covers months of cooking fat. It sautés, it fries, it makes crackers taste like actual food. It takes a plain lentil dish from something you force down to something you'd actually choose. Fat is the difference between a calorie and a meal. Build your stockpile like that distinction matters. There's a pairing that fed entire civilizations for thousands of years before the modern food system made it invisible. It's not exotic. It doesn't require a recipe book or a culinary degree. It just requires knowing one fact that most Americans have never been taught in the context of survival. Lentils paired with a whole grain, rice, cornmeal, whole wheat, form a complete protein. Together, they supply all essential amino acids your body cannot produce on its own. This is the same nutritional logic behind dal and rice in South Asia, mujadara in the Middle East, and countless other traditional staples that predate agriculture as we know it. Civilizations didn't survive on these combinations by accident. They survived on them because the math is sound. Now here's the practical edge. Lentils cook in 20 to 30 minutes without soaking. Dried beans take 45 to 120 minutes and require soaking overnight, which assumes you have abundant water and fuel. In a real emergency, that assumption is dangerous. Lentils sidestep it entirely. 1 cup of cooked lentils delivers roughly 18 grams of protein and 16 grams of fiber. For a few dollars a pound, shelf-stable for years in a sealed container, that is one of the most efficient calories you can put on a shelf. A 5-pound bag of dried lentils costs roughly $4 to $7 at any grocery store. That bag, combined with a bag of whole grain rice or cornmeal, gives a family of 4 enough protein for a week of meals. There is no emergency product on the market, freeze-dried or otherwise, that matches that ratio of nutrition to cost to ease of preparation, and they stayed on the shelf in 2020. While the bean section looked like a war zone, the lentil aisle sat there, patient, completely ignored. This one will feel wrong the first time you hear it, but stay with it. Whole popcorn kernels belong in your emergency pantry, not because of the snack, because of what they actually are: a dry, whole grain corn, one of the most versatile and long-lasting crops in human agricultural history. Here's the overlooked fact. Whole popcorn kernels, stored in an airtight container in a cool, dark place, can maintain structural integrity for years, with some preppers and long-term storage sources reporting usability out to 30 years under ideal conditions, though optimal popping quality tends to peak at 1 to 3 years. The hull protects the starchy interior. They resist moisture and pests better than many other grains. But here's where it gets strategic. Those same kernels can be ground into cornmeal. With a basic hand mill, or even a heavy-duty blender in a pinch, you have polenta, cornbread, porridge, and a thickening agent for soups. You're not stockpiling a snack. You're stockpiling a multi-use grain that most panicked shoppers walked right past on their way to the empty pasta aisle. During the 2020 supply disruptions and the major winter storms of 2021, grocery workers across multiple states reported a consistent pattern. Snack aisles stayed stocked while staple grains and cereals cleared out entirely. The person who understood that popcorn kernels and cornmeal kernels are functionally the same product walked out with something the crowd couldn't see. That's the advantage you're building here, not brute force stockpiling, thinking one step past where everyone else stops. You spend the money, you build the pantry, you have 3 months of calories on those shelves, and then, week 2 of a real emergency, your kids refuse to eat. Your spouse is eating just enough to function. You find yourself staring at a pot of plain lentils and rice for the 4th night in a row, and something in you just stops wanting it. This is called menu fatigue, and it is not weakness. It is physiology. NASA has studied this extensively in the context of long-duration space missions. Astronauts in isolation show decreased appetite, reduced caloric intake, and measurable body mass loss when exposed to monotonous menus, regardless of nutritional adequacy. The military has documented the same pattern in MRE research for decades. Repeated exposure to identical meals reduces consumption, even when soldiers are physically depleted and need calories. Menu variety isn't a luxury. It's a morale variable with direct health consequences, and in children it happens faster. A child who refuses to eat during a sustained emergency is a crisis inside a crisis. Parents who have lived through extended power outages or displacement events describe this exact dynamic: functional food that nobody will eat. The fix is simple: spices, concentrated broths, a bottle of hot sauce, white wine vinegar or apple cider vinegar. These items weigh almost nothing, cost almost nothing, last almost indefinitely, and they are the difference between a meal that tastes like an emergency and a meal that tastes like Tuesday night dinner. A tablespoon of cumin costs less than 50 cents. It transforms lentil soup from a grey duty into something with a smell, a personality, a reason to sit down. That reason matters more than you think after 2 weeks of disruption. Stock flavor, it's not optional. Think about what a fresh egg does in your kitchen. It binds batter. It scrambles into breakfast protein. It makes pancakes rise. It thickens sauces. It is the most functionally versatile ingredient in most American households. And on day 1 of a prolonged outage, every fresh egg you own becomes a ticking clock. What if they didn't have to be? Whole egg powder is one of the most underused items in long-term food storage. When stored properly in sealed containers in cool, dry conditions, powdered eggs can remain viable for 5 to 10 years under normal storage temperatures, and up to 25 years in optimal conditions with oxygen absorbers. That is not a prepper myth. That is USDA-validated food science. The dehydration process removes moisture, which is what allows microbial growth. No moisture, no spoilage cycle. Reconstituted with water, powdered eggs replicate nearly all culinary functions of fresh eggs. Not perfectly. The texture scrambles a little differently, and they won't poach. But for baking, for omelets, for protein in the morning when morale matters most, they work. A single numerica 10 can from brands like Augustin Farms or Over Easy runs $30 to $45 and contains the equivalent of 6 to 12 dozen eggs. The deeper value here is normalcy. One of the most underestimated forces in emergency psychology is the preservation of routine. Coffee in the morning, eggs for breakfast. These rituals are not frivolous. They are psychological anchors that signal to your brain that you have not lost everything. The ability to make scrambled eggs on day 14 of a blackout is worth more than any tactical piece of gear on your shelf. There is a product sitting in most grocery stores for under $2 a pound that has a verified shelf life of 30 years or more, retains full nutritional value when stored whole, and can be converted into bread, pasta, tortillas, porridge, and thickener with nothing more than water and a basic tool. Almost nobody buys it as a survival item. Whole wheat berries, stored correctly, in a sealed mylar bag or food-grade bucket with oxygen absorbers, in a cool and dark location, whole wheat berries can maintain 80% or more of their nutritional value for 30 years. This is not a claim made by a survival brand. It is a documented fact from food science research and long-term storage validation. The reason? The intact hull protects the grain's oils and starches from oxidation. Flour, by contrast, is already ground. The moment you grind wheat, those same oils become exposed. Properly stored flour might last 5 to 10 years under ideal conditions, but in typical household pantries, much less. You're buying the short version of the same ingredient when you buy pre-ground flour. A quality hand-operated grain mill, brands like Wondermill Jr. or Country Living, runs $40 to $175. That is a one-time purchase that converts a 30-year supply into fresh flour on demand. You grind what you need. The rest stays whole, protected, nutritionally intact. This is not a romantic homesteading project. It is the highest return on investment food preparation decision you can make. And the shelves were stocked with wheat berries in 2020, while flour disappeared within hours. Here is a fact that should change how you stock your pantry forever. Sardines have more calcium per serving than a glass of milk, approximately 382 mg per 100 grams compared to just 4 mg in tuna. They carry roughly 275% more vitamin B12 than tuna by daily value. They are higher in vitamin D, iron, phosphorus, copper, vitamin E, and omega-3 fatty acids. Specifically, the EPA and DHA forms your brain and cardiovascular system actually use. Ounce for ounce, sardines outperform tuna on nearly every micronutrient that matters most under stress. And yet, in every documented supply chain disruption in recent memory, tuna cleared first. Sardines stayed on the shelves. The reason is purely cultural. Tuna sandwiches are American nostalgia. Sardines are something your grandfather ate and something most people have never actually tried. That aversion is their strategic value to you. While everyone else strips the tuna aisle, the sardine shelf sits full, and the person who stocked it 6 months ago already has 3 cases at home. A can of sardines in olive oil from a brand like Wild Planet runs about $3 to $4. The oil itself is additional calories. The bones, soft enough to eat, provide calcium your emergency diet will otherwise lack entirely. Mercury load is significantly lower than large fish like tuna, which matters if you're eating canned fish regularly across weeks or months rather than once a week. Nobody is making the sardine case for emergency preparedness. That omission is your advantage. Fuel is invisible until it isn't. Most emergency food plans are calorie plans. They count what's on the shelf but never account for what it takes to cook it. Dried beans need 90 minutes of boiling. Whole grains need sustained heat. Rice needs 2 cups of water and 15 minutes of steady flame. In a real disruption, a winter storm that kills gas service, an evacuation that leaves you with a single camp stove and one canister of propane. Your cooking fuel is a hard ceiling on what you can actually prepare. Instant mashed potato flakes solve a specific and undervalued problem. They reconstitute with nothing more than hot water, and in a pinch, room temperature water given a few extra minutes. A standard canister from a brand like Idaho or Bob's Red Mill weighs almost nothing, costs $3 to $5, and if sealed and stored in a cool, dry location, carries a shelf life of 25 to 30 years. But here's the functional point that most people miss. Potato flakes aren't just a side dish, they are a thickener. Add a tablespoon to any thin soup or broth, and you have a meal with body and texture. They bind, they bulk. They take any liquid you have and turn it into something filling. Combined with powdered egg, butter powder, or ghee, potato flakes become a platform, not just a convenience. And psychologically, mashed potatoes are comfort food. There is a reason every Thanksgiving table has them. In a sustained emergency, comfort food is not a luxury. It is the thing that keeps people calm. It is the thing that makes a child eat when a child otherwise wouldn't. Stock potato flakes the way you stock medicine, because when you need them, that's exactly what they are. By week 2 of a real disruption, it won't be calories that break you. It'll be the sameness. You'll have food. You'll have enough to keep everyone functional, but the food will taste like cardboard and obligation. Every meal will feel like a punishment for not being prepared differently. That psychological erosion is real, documented, and preventable. And it comes down to 2 categories of items almost nobody puts in an emergency plan. The first is peanut butter powder. Brands like PB2 or Naked PB sell it for $8 to $12 a jar. In powdered form, the fat content is roughly 85% lower than traditional peanut butter, which is also why it lasts significantly longer, up to a year or more in sealed storage, versus a few weeks after opening for the jarred version. Reconstituted with water, it becomes a spread. Mixed dry into oatmeal or porridge, it becomes protein and flavor without needing any liquid. Add it to lentil soup and you've just made something with warmth, depth, and enough protein to feel like a meal instead of a ration. The second item is vinegar, and this one is extraordinary. White distilled vinegar, apple cider vinegar, and balsamic all behave essentially the same way in long-term storage. They are self-preserving. The acidity prevents microbial growth. There is no meaningful shelf life limit on properly stored vinegar. The FDA classifies it as indefinitely stable. A $3 bottle of apple cider vinegar does not expire. What vinegar does to food is what spice does to texture. It gives it an edge. It cuts through the dull sameness of grain-heavy meals. It preserves fresh food, sliced cucumbers, shredded cabbage, by quick pickling in minutes. It cleans surfaces. It disinfects. 1 ingredient, 4 functions, 0 expiration date. Here's something every history of modern crisis confirms, and every prepper channel forgets to frame correctly. In every documented extended emergency, from the 1994 Northridge earthquake to post-Katrina New Orleans to the prolonged COVID disruptions in 2020 and 2021, a parallel informal economy emerged almost immediately. Not barter in the Hollywood sense of trading ammunition for gasoline, something much quieter and more human. People trading comfort, trading morale, trading the small thing that made an unbearable situation briefly bearable. Coffee, dark chocolate, cigarettes, soap, razors. These items don't fill a caloric gap, they fill a psychological one. And in extended disruptions, psychological currency becomes as real as any other kind. Dark chocolate at 70% cocoa or higher is stable at room temperature for 1 to 2 years, longer in cooler storage. A $3 bar of 70% dark chocolate, kept in a sealed bag, does not rot. It does not require refrigeration. And in a community that has been living through 2 weeks of stress and disruption, it is worth far more than its shelf price to the right person. The same logic applies to instant coffee packets, single-serve hot cocoa, and even individually wrapped hard candies. This is not about becoming a merchant. It's about recognizing that in the full ecosystem of a sustained emergency, your value to your neighbors is not limited to what you can physically provide. The person who produces a cup of coffee on day 10 of a blackout becomes someone people want near them, someone people help, someone people protect. Stock a small box of comfort items, small, inexpensive, forgotten by everyone else. That box is not charity, it's infrastructure. Every obstacle to preparedness comes down to the same lie, that it requires a large initial investment, a dedicated weekend, and a personality shift you haven't made yet. It doesn't. It requires a different use of the $20 to $40 you're already spending every week at the grocery store. Here's the system. Pick 1 or 2 items from this list per week. Add them to your regular cart, not as a separate mission, not as a survival project, but as part of your normal shopping run. Week 1, a jar of ghee and a bag of lentils. Week 2, a canister of powdered eggs and a bottle of apple cider vinegar. Week 3, a bag of wheat berries and a jar of peanut butter powder. Week 4, sardines, a box of potato flakes and a small brick of 70% dark chocolate. 4 weeks, roughly $120 to $150 total. You now have the foundation of a 60 to 90 day food reserve that covers fat, protein, carbohydrates, flavor, morale, and basic barter, using ingredients that are legitimately shelf stable for years, and that will never compete with a panicked crowd for shelf space. The one rule that makes this system work over time is rotation. You are not building a bunker. You are building a living pantry. Eat from it. Replace what you use. Label everything with a purchase date. Keep the oldest items at the front. This practice, first in, first out, is how commercial kitchens manage inventory, and it is the reason professional food operations never waste. Apply it at home, and your emergency supply never stagnates, never expires, and never costs you extra. You do not need to become a prepper. You need to become the kind of household that doesn't shatter under a real shock. That household is not built in a panic. It's built on Tuesdays, in ordinary grocery stores, 1 jar at a time. You've spent the last half hour learning about cooking fat and fish nobody buys, and grain that outlasts the people who store it. That might feel like a lot of tactical information, and it is, but underneath all of it is something simpler. Every item on this list was available to you before today. The shelf was never empty. The knowledge was always there. What changed in the last 30 minutes is that you saw the shelf differently. That's the only real preparation, not the stockpile. The shift in how you see the margin between comfortable and crisis, and the calm, deliberate decision to close it, not out of fear, out of respect for the people in your house who depend on you. The pantry you build this week isn't a bunker, it's a statement. It says, whatever comes, we don't shatter. Here's your one action for today, not a list. One thing. Go to your pantry right now, or think of it clearly in your mind and ask yourself, if the grocery stores were closed for 2 weeks starting tomorrow, what runs out on day 3? Whatever that answer is, that's where you start. Buy that one thing this week. Just one. Ghee, lentils, powdered eggs, sardines. Pick one item from today's video and add it to your cart before you sleep tonight. That's it. That's the whole system in motion. If this video helped you see your kitchen differently, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that this kind of content matters, and it helps us reach the families who need it most. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. We release 1 video a week. No filler, no fear-mongering, just the honest material that actually builds a resilient household. And leave a comment below. What's the first item you're adding? I read every single one. The shelf isn't empty yet. Use the time you have. The pantry most people build is designed for the emergency they imagine. Build one for the emergency you can't.